Dustin Simpson here is from the California RV Specialist, and let's get all three of us up here. And then we also have Chuck Woodbury, who is the editor of RVTravel.com, and this is being recorded live, and we're on October 12th, 2022, and today we are going to talk about quality, what the RV manufacturers don't want you to know. And we have gotten a ton of questions concerning cabinets falling off and slide rooms, and then it just goes on and on and on. So we've got a few questions that have already been brought in through the website, through the Gmail account. And if you've got any questions, make sure you post them. We don't have any listed right now. But Dustin, let me ask you this. I hear it from the owners. We get questions in about quality. What do you think the state of quality right now is in the units that you see coming into your dealership or your service center?
Well, we just see that they're, because of the COVID and everything that happened, everybody had cut back and everybody had sent people home. So the quality is kind of lacking a lot, to where there's a lot of different mistakes being made. It's just kind of all over the board. There's not one area that, we're only having plumbing issues or roofing issues. It's just across the whole spectrum of it.
Yep. Well, and I see too that, I've been in the business since 1983, and I actually worked at Winnebago for 15 years. And I know we had a very stringent quality program. We tested, we had sine waves and all this kind of stuff. And yet you're still going to have some issues with things that happened. And what I see is this last year we sold 600,000 RVs out in the market, and they couldn't make them fast enough. And then you throw in supply chain issues, and so you're bound to have some issues that are going to happen with those units that are out there. And for me, what I look at, and I've been doing seminars for the past 15 plus years, maybe more than that, and in the buyer seminar, I highly urge people, when you're looking to buy a new or a used RV, that you really have to do your homework. And one of the questions that came in earlier here was, how do you know what to look for? How do you know what's the roof construction or the sidewall construction, or some of those things when you're just walking through? How do you educate yourself? How do you answer that question?
Well, I've been trying to put a lot of information online on our Facebook groups and, different other groups that we have sharing, but there's so much information out there. So usually the customer will come in, hey, Dustin, what kind of RV should I go buy? My wife and I have decided to get something newer. And at the end of the day, I look at it as, to myself, being in the industry like you for I'm almost 25 years now into this. The only real difference to me is the color patterns and the decals. Think of it like refrigerators, awnings. It's one of three companies are building those nowadays. So you have, your options. Maybe there's a small, medium, and large version of it. But, I always try to tell them, look at all the plumbing lines, look at all the cabinetry, really spend the time and, like you're saying, do the research to figure out what they're buying, because there's huge dollar differences. And the consumer doesn't see it. They just go in and get the shock and awe, and hey, it looks beautiful, and let's get it.
Yep, I agree.
$10,000, $20,000 cheaper, it looks just as nice as this other one. Yep. And they're not seeing what's behind the scenes or behind the walls of it.
I agree. I do this buyer seminar, and I've done over 1,000 seminars, and I see people are shopping like they shop for cars. And I ask the question when I'm out there, how many people have ever built a house or remodeled a house? And, you get the hands that go up and say, okay, how long did it take to pick out carpet? And they're like, or whatever flooring you're going to use. You'll spend weeks going through the fiber ounce per yard. The thing about carpet is you walk into an RV, and I think people are too focused on shopping like an automobile, that all this stuff is going to be the same, and they get wrapped up in floor plan and the wow factors. Well, full body paint, and yeah. They don't ask the same questions that they would when they're looking to remodel or to build a home or to buy a home. Because let's take carpet, for example. The average carpet in a travel trailer, I think probably is still only around about the 12 to 13 fiber ounce per yard. Carpet in your house is anywhere from 50 to 70. But you don't ask that question. They walk in and, what kind of carpet does it have? Good. The thicker the carpet, the better the weave and that stuff, the longer it's going to last. That's why we see carpet. How many times you got a unit that comes in, the carpet looks like it's 50 years old.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, and
And like you're saying, some of them are clay matted, like back in the old days is what we call it, the cheap carpet on the roll at Home Depot or Lowe's.
Yep.
Some of them are, woven, nicer sewn, 20, 30-year stuff.
Well, and I spent a lot of time going through the different carpets because, when I was at Winnebago, we chose to use a better carpet. We used an olefin that is a spun plastic. It's impervious to stains, and it had an action back backing, which is a synthetic backing. I think Amoco Oil designed it, but it won't absorb moisture. It won't mold. It won't mildew. It won't stretch. All things that I think are important in an RV. And yet most of the time you get the jute back, cheap carpet, 12 fiber ounce per yard. The pad is maybe 1/8 of an inch, that white, all that stuff translates to the fact it's going to wear down. It's not going to last. But we don't ask that question when we're looking at it. You see people walk in and they just, when was the last time anybody asked about fiber ounce per yard? And, a lot of times the dealer won't even know because somebody else spec'd it out. And, but those are the things, in my opinion, that, you really got to look at it, take away from that automotive shopping and look at house shopping. And somebody asked a question, well, how do you know what to look for? Well, none of us knew what to look for when we started shopping for houses. But you learn, you start looking at, okay, I'm going to look at the cabinets. I'm going to look at the framework and that stuff. I'm going to jump here. We did get a question that come in from Mike. Says, how much is weight driven, trying to get the RV as light as possible? So, that's a good question as well, because, you see two units sitting on a showroom or a lot or somewhere side by side, and they look like they're pretty identical. And one is $5,000 or $10,000 less than the other one. And it's in there somewhere. You got to find where that's at. And a big price point is weight driven right here, is like he said, is you've got axles that will only hold a certain amount. So you got a dry weight of that unit, which does not include the water, the LP, cargo, in motorhomes, people, because they're going to be in it while it's driving. And then you got a cargo carrying capacity that gets you to gross vehicle weight rating. And, some of these, I see 600 pounds. Tell me a little bit about the different axles that you see in some of the travel trailers and price points.
Well, it's also comes down to, when the manufacturer's building the coach, they're resourcing those frames through other companies, and they're saying, hey, I need it 30 feet long, 8.6 wide. We're going to put a slide out over here. We're going to put a slide out there, and they're not communicating with them what they're truly going to be carrying. So, they're always kind of right on the border when it comes to the weight. Like you're saying, the load weight stuff, carrying weight, sometimes it's very minimal. Sometimes it's like 500 pounds, and you go, wow, if I put more than 500 pounds of cargo with everything being fully loaded, I'm going to overload this. And all the time we have units that come in with flat springs that are brand new, and we're checking them in and we're thinking, are they overloading it? And they've just bought it. And we go in and see that there's nothing really in that unit. So we know that they're kind of overbuilding the coach. They're adding a bigger refrigerator than what they originally called for. For some reason or another, they've put in a heavier couch or not, something altered their original design.
Yep.
You're saying like paint and body, even I brought a couple pieces of fiberglass. So siding on the sides of walls of a coach, right? There's two different thicknesses here. There's one that's at, 0.45 thickness, and the other one's at 0.65 thickness. So the heaviness of the fiberglass, one you can see like the kitty hairs and stuff in, and the other one you can't. So I mean, thickness of fiberglass, besides being full body paint, is it a couple colors or is it multiple colors? All that stuff adds up. Some stuff. Go ahead.
Well, and here's a price point that we get into a lot with the travel trailers. Now, I have not seen this with motorhomes since the late 1980s. This is a unit that we call stick and tin.
Yeah.
It's got Mesa sidewall, which is the ribbed style sidewall fiberglass that you see. Sometimes it's actually aluminum on that as well. And they do a aluminum. They do a. Let me get to this. I know this is hard to see, but just for reference, it's a wood framework. It's loose fill insulation. It's a very thin roof material and rubber roof stuff, and they do that because it's cheap.
Yep.
Anybody can cut wood. I don't have to have fancy jigs. I don't have to have the expensive equipment and the engineering and all that stuff, and it's very forgiving. So that unit, nothing wrong with this
wood either.
What's that?
It's not the best quality of wood either. It's the cheap,
no,
knotted up.
No, and usually stapled together, in various different places. But there's nothing wrong with this unit if you understand that and you don't try to take it down the road and put 50,000 miles on it and expect it to hold together. Because if we go back here and we take a look at that first slide, that Mesa sidewall comes in 18 to 20 inch widths, and so it is seamed every 18 inches up along the side of that sidewall. There you will see what's called a Pittsburgh seam, and that's going to move back and forth when you take this unit down the road. So that means you don't have the structure in that. You don't have as big a cabinets. You don't have as big as carrying capacity in it, and you got more maintenance in that unit. And then the loose fill insulation adds no structure whatsoever to that sidewall. So, I've seen these where they literally pull apart at certain seams and areas because, you can't expect to take this and use it on a full-time basis going all over the country. Now, if I'm going to go down to the lake and I'm going to let it sit there and, I'm going to use it sparingly throughout the season, I probably have about 6 months of usable weather before it gets really cold in the north.
I was just going to say, it's not a 4-season unit.
Yeah. But people don't do that research, and they aren't looking at that stuff. And you can use this year round. I don't know how many times I've had a question come in that somebody said, well, I want to do some boondocking and some cold weather camping, and I have loose fill insulation, and I have a Group 24 battery, and I have a 12-volt fridge. That's not a good unit to boondock with, and so the more you can educate yourself, the thing that I would look up is, so here's a question, but how can you look at wall construction of cabinets, how cabinets are hung? Sales professionals won't tell you the truth. Get the brochure, go to the website. If they don't show you the construction, and like the next one I'm going to show you here, if I'm going to do any type of full-time camping, or, I want to make sure I don't have to maintain those sidewalls, I'm going to get a full one-piece fiberglass outer skin, block foam insulation, and aluminum framework, which is, I got back to there. Aluminum framework, all that adds to the structural integrity of that. And, the way you can tell is sometimes if you open up the cabinet doors, for this slide example, you open up that outside compartment, sometimes you can actually see what's in the framing around it. But you're right, it's very difficult to find what that structure is. And that's why, I go back to the fact that the more you can get on the website, the more you can look at the brochures. If they have an exploded view of that thing, like this one here, just to show what that's at. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. And I equate it to a bookcase, and an RV is just like a home. If I want to build a home, I can go out and build $1 million custom made home with all solid oak cabinetry that's custom designed for everything that I'm doing. Or I can buy a house that comes in 2 halves on the back of a big trailer, and I put it together, and that is all of a sudden all Walmart style furniture. There's nothing wrong with that if you understand that stuff and you don't put it through the rigors that we put some of this stuff through and expect it to hold up. And my analogy of a bookcase is, if I need it to hold soap and it's going to sit in the basement, I go to Walmart and I buy a 1995 particle board bookcase. It does exactly what I want it to do. I don't even get the fake wood veneer on the outside of it. But if I'm going to put it in the living room, put a 200-pound TV in it, next to some Bernhardt furniture, my wife's going to make me get an armoire, right? That's a very expensive bookcase. And that's the same thing with RVs. You really need to to take the time to educate yourself and to look at that stuff. Another price point, and I don't know, and so I've stepped back here just a second. Quality is a word that's used throughout, the owner saying, oh, that's terrible quality, or what manufacturer makes better quality of this than that. And, I think people misunderstand quality versus materials. You look at countertops, for example. So you can buy a unit that has a Formica countertop, or you can buy a unit that has a quartz countertop or a Corian countertop. And they go, oh, that's Corian, so that's better quality. Corian is plastic that has been marketed very well. So that's amenities. In my opinion, the quality comes in my opinion, is when you start opening those cabinets up and you take a look at the framing that's underneath that, or the overhead cabinets. I mean, how many times have you had units come in where the overhead cabinets are hanging down?
Yeah, all the time.
So
well, that's the thing is, no matter what, if it's suspension, or when you look at suspension, I always say, hey, there's $1,000 worth of suspension on these trailers that are $100,000 plus units. They have the old traditional, I like to say 1950 technology. Mm-hmm. They haven't added like slipper springs or independent axles or disc brakes, or like you were saying, the bearings. And then you were talking about cabinet quality, right? Well, here's a piece of style that's that used for the cabinets. And if you look close enough, let's see if it doesn't get distorted here. If you look close enough at it, see how there's basically sandwiched between the two materials. See, it's a different color on the top and then on the bottom.
Yep.
Right. So that inner core is soft. Yep. And then it's sandwiched with two thin pieces of wood on it, and then it's covered with photo tape. It's just wrapped. So you over tighten a screw in that, and it's not going to hold. It's going to shoot right out, or it's going to crack it.
No. And that's another. And Chuck wanted to chime in. Chuck, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just had a few things. Early on, I wanted to say the reason that we decided to talk today about all this is something that I've observed in RV shows, just little shortcuts. And I think that people don't look at. People go into it at an RV show, they sit in the couch and they say, oh, isn't this beautiful? I like and they don't look at anything. Nope. And so I've got a couple of things to show you here. And here's one. Just look at this. This is a cabinet. You see what happens when you let go?
Yeah.
It just falls.
The angel's crooked too.
They didn't bother to spend a few dollars to put something on there to hold it. And now if you buy that RV without opening the cabinets, what are you going to be propping that? You can't. So that's just a little, and that's what somebody on a really expensive coach is going to do. They can save $5 on a cabinet. Now here's another something.
But before you go off on that cabinet, Chuck, let me just add a couple things to it. Put that video up again, and take a look at the hinges. Look at the hinges up on the top.
Yeah.
Those are cheap. Those are cheap $1 hinges. Look at how it's the little plastic thing that holds it in the bottom. That's going to break that little roller piece.
Yeah.
Double roller.
It's the cheapest hardware you could possibly get.
Yeah. And the thing is here is remember that these manufacturers are competing on price, and they've got to save everything you can. So when you see two RVs side by side, one's a lot cheaper. It's these little shortcuts that will that they're taking. Now look at this. This is I'll do this twice. What's missing here? What do you see missing?
I know.
I know what's missing there. There's no plugs. And there's no little. Where do you put your plug-in?
No nightstand.
Where do you put your CPAP machine? Where do you put if you have an electric blanket? Where do you put, your water for taking a sip during the night?
Yeah.
And RV manufacturers,
No reading lights, no books.
No reading lights. RV manufacturers, I'm told, have to put in. This is a very loose explanation. So many plugs per foot of RV, how long it is. Well, it doesn't say they have to spread them out in good spots. If they want to put them all in the kitchen, then leave them out of the bedroom, then they save some money on wire. They save the wiring. Now here's
labor.
And labor, of course. Here's
Yeah.
one more. This is an expensive fifth wheel. Do you see anything that might be missing there?
No towel rack.
No towel racks. They didn't put any towel racks in here.
And it doesn't look like any outlet on the side of the wall either.
No.
There's one down at the.
There is one down in the front. Okay.
But
Yep.
sometimes the plugs are in. I saw one where it's right where you sit at the dinette. It would literally be touching your leg if you had 4 people in there.
Yep.
So my point about all of this is that that it's not that the RV manufacturers are cheating you. They're just doing everything they can to keep their costs down, knowing that most people are not going to look at anything, because I believe that buying an RV is one of the or selling an RV has got to be one of the easiest things in the world, because people buy based on emotion. They look at it, oh, wouldn't this be great to be sitting out by the lake, and they don't look at all these little things. And closet space, the construction of cabinets, where are the electric plugs, all those things, and the things we're talking about here. So I think I think those are all things that I'm trying to say is look at everything, and you guys can point out some of those in this next half hour.
It's not that I can say bad on any of the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's all price point. It's all related. Do you want to go stay at the Motel 6 that was built 100 years ago, 50 years ago down the street? Or do you want to go stay at the Hilton? You're buying, it comes back to that you're paying for what you get, and whether it's a 4-season coach or a 2-season coach, lightweight, they're having to build for so many different people out there. Price point, weight, use, it's all over. So you're getting every quality of coach out there.
Yeah.
And like Dave says, and I think this is so true, is that people think that without even questioning themselves, that they are buying the same thing as a car. They're going to get it. They're going to take it out this weekend.
Yep.
That is not the way it is with an RV. You're hardly ever going to get one that doesn't need something done to it. And they don't think that. They fall in love. We remember being in high school and falling in love with the beautiful girl or the handsome guy. Did it really matter who they were? What we had that rush, and we could go steady right away, or we could hold back a while and see what they really were. That's what's going on. So that's really all I had to say. And I see a question here for.
Yeah, I was going to say that question from Mike there. My background also is my dad was a general contractor. And so he made me go to school for architecture and engineering and also building inspection. And so we had housing codes, so ICBO, and in the codes, they had a bunch of regulations, where it came to, like you were talking about outlets, how many outlets we had. Windows had to be a certain height. Outlets had to be a certain height. They had to be so far away from sinks and countertops. And there was all these rules for our housing industry to protect us on a home, but there doesn't seem to be that same standard in an RV, because an RV falls into a different classification. And so, like you're saying, with the room, space, the quality, the expense,
Here's a class.
A new product, a new model.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many new models, and every year it's another new model. Back in the old days, where we'd go buy I don't know what year to use an example, but say a 70 Camaro, that same body style was used for 2 or 3 years. Sort of say accessorized it or changed something on it, but with it being constantly new, even when we call the manufacturers to say, hey, we have a problem with something, they don't have any advice, because they haven't seen that coach come back yet.
Yeah.
They're like, well, when you find out what's wrong with it, please let us know.
And to get back on the standards like NHTSA or anything like that, the thing that people don't realize is RVIA is the only governing body of the RV industry, and they have codes. They have the electrical department and the plumbing department, but it's pretty basic stuff. And a classic example of that is we were working on a fifth wheel toy hauler, and I won't tell you the brand that it is, but it was owned by an electrician, a friend of mine, who had a nice big huge bay, and we were shooting videos on all this different stuff. And every time we went in and opened up one of the cabinets or took off a faceplate, I think the first thing we had was he had a cheater valve, we call it. And it's a valve that comes off the black tank. It's supposed to go up through the roof, but they couldn't move the black tank because they bought the frame from somebody else. They didn't build the whole thing themselves. They assembled. So they are then required to work around all that stuff. And so this vent came up underneath the cabinet. And so since you couldn't go up to the roof because there's an open cabinet there, they put a siphon cap on it right underneath it. And we call that a cheater vent. And they go bad all the time. So what happens is they draw air in, and they're supposed to seal so odor doesn't get out. And then the seal goes bad and you get odors in there. And so you have to replace that cap. But we took the faceplate off this thing.
We call it program.
and it looked like somebody had, it was paneling behind it, and somebody had basically started a hole and then ripped out all the paneling, and it was just in splinters. And it was absolutely horrible. And granted, nobody sees it from once the decorative plate's over the front of it, but just that fit and finish. And you see that all the time in RVs where I think Chuck had a picture of one where they made a hole about 6 inches round and put a 2-inch pipe in it. Yeah. And, I see that so often because what they do, and let me get to the picture here. I'm going to put this in. Oops. Add to the street. This is kind of hard to tell, but if you start looking in the compartments, looking underneath, and you'll see these holes that drain pipes are going through and wiring's going through. And they make this generic hole, I think, for every unit they build, and no matter what's going through there, then they fill it with expandable foam and they paint it black. And we accept that. That nest of wires there. And getting back to my electrician friend, every time we pull the thing out and he saw the wiring, he goes, "Well, that's not the code." Well, not the residential code. And those are the things that as he started looking and, with a sharper eye, he knew what he should look for. He just didn't look. And all of a sudden he's like, wow, why did I do this?
I won't say the manufacturer, but we have the video on our YouTube. And one of the things was my bunkhouse. My kids are freezing in the bunkhouse. So we went through, we checked all the pressures and the temperature readings and all the volumes and flows. Everything was solid. When we pulled, so there's a bunk bed with a whole bunch of drawers underneath of it with in cabinets. When we took out the drawers, behind the drawers, you could literally see outside. You could see daylight. Any wind or air that was blowing was coming in through the drawers and into the bedroom. So no matter what they did, they couldn't keep the bedroom warm. So we ended up taking all the drawers out and insulating it, paneling it. But you're right. I want to say back 10 years ago, we used to offer a service that it kind of went away for a while because the quality started improving. But we offered a service that was a dust and rodent, it was an air, dust, and rodent intrusion service, where we would go through and open up all the cabinets and paneling and just look around at stuff and block off, seal off, and insulate anything that we could to kind of help keep the coaches, warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer.
Yep. Well, one of the things that I tell people in the seminar, I don't need solid oak cabinetry. I don't need Corian and marble and tile flooring, all that stuff. I don't want to pay for that. But, I get in and I start looking at the cabinets, and I go back to that one more time because you open up that cabinet and inside you look at the framework of that. And, you were just talking about it here. A lot of the price point manufacturers will use a pine, a really cheap pine, which is that soft one that you have there. And they put that up, and then they either use the wrap like you had there, but even worse, they'll put a piece of paneling up and cut the hole, and the paneling becomes what should look like solid wood framework. And people they don't even think of that. So I tell people, walk in, I want that frame screwed in place. I don't want it stapled.
Yeah.
Another picture we have here, we just had a lady that sent in, and it's a little hard to see this, but I wanted to show the picture here. If you look really close, this is a close-up of a cabinet mounted into an RV, and they hit a railroad tracks, and the cabinets came down from the top of the roof. Yeah. Now, this roof, you can see it's got hair cell. It's got a 1/8 inch plywood luan, it's called, backer board that these are screwed in. And if you look really close, you'll see two of the screws didn't hold at first because they installed one of those anchors. That yellow piece you see in there, in both of those things are anchors, and you wouldn't have put that in first and then tried to do it. You put the screw in, it didn't hold, you pulled it back down, you brought the cabinet down, you put the anchor in, you tried it again, didn't work, you tried it again, another one, didn't work, and finally the third one on the left-hand side bit something. Most of these manufacturers, they're simply mounting this stuff as fast as they can, stapling the frameworks, putting this, and they're relying on it holding on that back side. And people think, well, they're screwing it to the 16-inch on center. No, they're not.
Yeah. Even going back to the framework and stuff too, when you were talking about like the stick and tin trailers versus like a fiberglass trailer, customers will come in and they'll say, I've got an aluminum frame trailer, my trailer's stout. And they don't realize that the thickness of the aluminum is about as thin as a credit card.
Yep. And
it's tack welded. It's not welded like we weld on steel. It's real lightweight, and so it's just thin stuff. And so they'll, even in the units that have the aluminum framing, they'll add that cheap wood, Dave, in through that to give it something to bite into. So if you put a screw in through the same hole more than once, it's done.
Now I do have to give kudos to Winnebago because they actually sandwich a steel plate in the sidewall wherever a cabinet's going to be mounted on the side or on the roof of it. They've got these laser diagrams that when the roof comes out, and they lay those down in and laminate it. So they do actually have something to screw into. When we used to do our training programs, there was 3 of us that would hang from these cabinets, and we would go over to a competitor's unit and they would go, no, at the dealership. We literally pulled cabinets off the roofs from other units. So those are the questions I would be asking as I walked in, and if they can't answer it, and granted, you can't tell if that's up there, but if they can't answer it, chances are it's not in there.
Yeah.
And so
what about this wiring diagram? A question from David.
Yep. And that's very common in the industry. 2 reasons. First of all, I know for a fact that there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have wiring diagrams, they have schematics, they'll provide them to the dealership, and they will not give them to owners because they're trying to protect the dealership's labor, basically. They don't want the average owner to do his own
wiring
handyman work at home. They want you to take it to a dealership, so they say we don't have wiring diagrams.
Business back to the dealer.
Yeah. Now, again, I get back to Winnebago, and you go online and you go to the resource page, the owner's resource page, and you get every wiring diagram and 3D prints of where everything is at on that. So, but it costs a lot of money to do that. And, the second thing is there are a lot of RVs out there that are basically, they've got a real rough schematic. I just got one for a unit we were working on trying to find the inverter. And I got this overview with little lines that, I had a better wiring diagram for the first garage I built that I sketched out on a napkin. It seemed like, and there are some of those that just, they are literally hand built as they go down the line.
Yeah.
And it, where is this going to go this time? And, whoever showed up this week thinks it's better to run them up over the cabinet and down this way. And they're all over the place.
Different department because somebody didn't show up.
Yeah. Well, and I think you probably run into this a lot more when you got somebody that comes in and you need to work on.
So yesterday we had somebody come in, prior customer. He came in and said, "Hey, I just bought a $120,000 fifth wheel toy hauler." He says, "Mine doesn't have a ladder on it." He goes, I seen another one at the dealership's lot that had a ladder on the side of it. And he wanted to order a ladder. And I had to stop him and say, "Hey, there may not be the structure in the wall to add that ladder."
Yeah.
So, we had to find that out. He called back later today to say, "Hey, I confirmed there is no structure in that wall. Thank you for stopping me from buying the ladder. It would have just ripped right off the wall." Yep. And for people that are just clicking on and watching with us, we don't want you to think that, I don't want you to think this is a negative talk. We want to educate you. And whether you're going to go buy a new coach or a newer coach than what you currently have,
Yep.
or you have a friend or a family member, we want you to learn what we have to offer so that it can help protect them when they go and do, a trade in or buying a new one. I mean, that's kind of, I think that's what we envision, at least I see.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and a telltale sign, in my opinion, and I tell people all the time, when you are looking at a new unit and you're walking through, you open up the cabinets, you open up look everywhere. How much sawdust do you see? And
take
just
your
building junk still sitting around there, and wiring that's exposed, and then they cover up the gaps with huge amounts of silicone all over the place.
Gary Bunzer, the late Gary Bunzer, who was called the RV doctor, and he was a good friend of mine. He told me about one day about the heating vents that go through the tubes, whatever you call them, losing the word. And he said, that some manufacturers, instead of cutting them to size, so they'd go from the heater to the back of the back vent of the RV or to the front, so go direct, they would just like that. They would just fold them all up and make them fit down there. And so the heat was having to go around in circles until it finally got there. And most of us that have RVs know that there's going to be more heat coming out of one closest to the heater than the vents that are farther away. And so you would never know that if you didn't,
Well, yeah, there you get back to price points. In your house, you would never have this in your house. No. And in your house, you have ductwork that runs on the ceiling of the basement or the crawl space or whatever it happens to be. And you got vents strategically placed in various areas. There are some manufacturers that do that, but the majority of them do this because it's cheaper to do, less labor, less engineering, and the cost of putting a vent underneath it. So much of that is driven by labor costs, and the average person doesn't know it, doesn't look for it. And again, it's not that I have to have that in-floor ducting, but if I'm going to be using it in the wintertime or even cold weather, I can find below freezing weather in the mountains every single month of the year, pretty much. And you have to decide if that's important to you.
And you look at anybody's house, you see double bagged insulation pipes for the heat ducts and the AC, versus this stuff is just the cheapest run of the mill. I mean, when we do coach remodels and we're repurposing and removing the ductwork underneath and rechanging it so that it flows better, or moving a vent, that we had a friend that owns a fifth wheel, and at the base of his sink was his floor register. So every time he brushed his teeth or washed his hands, he was always, either standing on a floor register or dropping something into it. And so, when we're remodeling, when we're fixing things and we're changing things, we move stuff like that all the time. Same with, again, going back to if somebody's buying something new, we see a lot of this pipe. This is that new flex pipe.
Yep.
And they keep running across scenarios, and printed right on the pipe, it says, this is for cold water application only. And we keep getting owners that are getting leaks. So don't be afraid when you get into a unit. Look at the pipe. Look at if it's a PEX pipe. Look at if it's, what color it is. If it's red, white, and blue, is it all white? Exactly. Look at the details. Take your smartphone and go behind when you're opening up a cabinet door. Say you're in the kitchen. You opened up your cabinet door. There's always a false panel there. Maybe there's a water pump behind it or whatever's behind it. Take your smartphone behind it, take a picture, pull it out, and look at what's back there.
Yep.
The quality. Drawers. Pull a drawer out inside there. Even if you're not gonna buy it, pull it out. Look back behind there. Yep. See how the drawer guide. Is it a metal drawer rail? Is it a plastic drawer guide rail? Is it stapled in place? Is it screwed in place?
Well, that's a big one. I'm sure you see it all the time. The average RV manufacturer, when they build a cabinet with drawers in it for the kitchen or whatever, they use those plastic little rollers that go back, and they've got the triangular. They're screwed to the back wall up against the sidewall. They're plastic. They may, and I've even seen
in place. There are two parts.
Yeah, well, and the funny part is that I've seen dealer salespeople will pull the drawer out, and it'll have a metal runner on the bottom of the drawer.
Yeah.
And they go, look at this, solid metal runners. These are never going to break. No, the guide is plastic. and it's a rail that goes in, like you said, it's 2-piece. So on against the wall, it slides in to the wall there, and that's supposed to hold in place. They break.
And sometimes that wood is just, like you're saying, stapled in place.
Yep.
And it's the kind of wood that you would throw away at a construction yard.
Well, Chuck, you had a picture of a drawer?
I think I have a picture of a drawer. Let me see if I can find it here. This is a funny story on this one. Where is it?
We had an owner a while back that was mad about their cabinets, and when they came in,
I can't find it.
My cabinet, she was all upset, and it was a pantry shelves.
Can you put up Mike's comment, Chuck? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is funny. Mike Grima just posted. Now I have to go run and check my cabinet drawers.
The picture I have is it was in an RV show, and it was a drawer that somebody pulled out, and the front of it come right off, and you can see there was 3 nails in there. That was it. So I went out to the salesman and I said, "Did you notice
3 brad nails?
Huh?
Brad nails, the thin little brad nails." Not even good ones.
And I pulled it out, and the guy, I went out to the salesman. I said, "Did you see that drawer in there?" And he came in, he looked at it, and he says, "Oh, I guess a lot of people have been opening and closing it." And I thought to myself, like, you don't open and close the drawers when you buy, when you're living in the RV.
Yep.
And but I mean, it just was, you could see it. I would say to these people, if they get the chance, it's really wise to go to a factory and take the tour, and you will see the insides of the RV before it's all put together. And I took one and I'm telling you, I saw lots of some of that wood in there. The little pieces of wood, the split. I mean, half the screws are put in, split the wood, and it was and it's staples and glue. I mean, and these things are going down the road, bang bang. The roads are in terrible condition, and so I mean, listen, if they build our houses out of this stuff, nobody'd ever buy. I mean, our houses don't generally go through an earthquake every.
Well, and the temperature changes, and that's a big thing that I've always looked at when I walk through an RV is if whatever they're going to mount to this thing. Let's take like the A pillars on a motorized. The A pillars are where the windshield and sidewall meet, and they put a plastic cover over that. And most manufacturers just have they buy 1-piece plastic and they put screws in it, and those screws rip through, and they leave these little hairline cracks wherever they dug in it because they're self-tapping screws. In the automobile industry, if you look at a car or a truck, every single fastener is designed into whatever it's going into. There's a hole, there's an indentation, everything is grommeted and in place. And you look at the RV and it's just cut very crudely cut into there. And so now you take that RV and you put it into sub-zero temperatures, and or just even mildly below freezing temperatures, and those hairline cracks are going to take off and go. And that little attention to detail, I think the more you start looking at some of this stuff and think, wow, this drawer is made out of particle board. How well is that going to hold up? It's just.
That's what I was saying about like the cabinets that particular customer was talking about. It falls on both the buyer and the seller.
Exactly.
I try not to say it to people, but I feel that an RV was typically built to last 3 to 5 years, or at least they know the first owner is going to have it 3 to 5 years, and then it's going to get passed on to the next guy. So, every time we open up an undercarriage, to get in to do some plumbing work or replace a dump valve, we're constantly like examples. We've got a unit in here right now that's I think it's $150,000 fifth wheel. It has some water issues. The guy has a 100-gallon tank or 90-gallon tank on one side and a 60-gallon on the other. He's actually can't fill either tank from a Nautilus system, and has 2 different fills. So you can fill both tanks off of either side, but he cannot fill each tank. So he has to basically he's pumping out about 60 gallons of water on the ground before he can get the other one filled because it's designed wrong. Well, manufacturers will say, hey, you're going to give you so many hours to go in there. Well, they're not remembering that when they built that frame, it was upside down. They did all the work while it was upside down and they flipped it back over. Now we're having to contend with all the wiring that's loose, all the plumbing that's loose, and fixing other stuff before we can even close it back up. And so you're talking about, speed and production. Have you seen some of the new nails that they're using, Dave, to shoot a nail through the steel so they can just tack the nails up instead of using like a self-tap screw or, and that's hard to get those out. And then or have
they don't care. They don't have to work on it.
Yeah, it's made to not be, friendly to work on them.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing I gotta comment about is that a lot of you mentioned it, Dustin, that some of this goes back onto the owners and the potential buyers. First of all, you got to do your education. I would go through that thing with a fine-tooth comb, because of not only the quality, but just the rapid build, the demand, there's been several podcasts about how some of these big box store RV dealerships that are, mega places are selling. I mean, 600,000 units last year. They can't service those. They can't PDI them. They can't go through with a fine tooth comb like you should do before you get it. So I was on a flight back from a show one time, and there was two couples that were on the flight with me, and they were flying back to Forest City to go to Winnebago. And they just both of them bought a coach online, went through the whole thing, but they were going to stay there 3 days at that dealership's lot doing an orientation and a shakedown cruise. Yeah. So they were right there. But, I mean, one of the things that just really surprises me so many times when I hear somebody bought a unit, they loaded it up and went on that 3,000 mile trip, and I had problems on the other side of the country. Why didn't you do an orientation? Why didn't you, do that shakedown cruise 20 miles away?
We just wrote an article too, on RV Travel about a 5-part series. The last one was our advice to the consumer. And I've literally, Dave, had people pull in and say, how do I close my vent lid on my roof? And the panel wasn't cut for the hole. Yep. How do I dump my tanks? And the valves were missing. So the owners, if you're an owner and you're at an RV dealership or getting ready to go purchase one, if the guy that's doing the walkthrough doesn't, can't explain to you what he's doing, stop and go get somebody else, because you're paying for that.
Yeah.
I don't think a walkthrough is even sufficient. That just shows you how to use stuff. Yeah. It doesn't point out all the stuff they don't want you to point out. Here's that drawer.
Yeah.
There it is.
Those are the cheapest brad nails, and you can see the layering of wood in that too. So it's a veneer, layered wood piece. It's not, and the bottom of it is thin Luan. Those are the things that you start pulling those drawers out, and you look at, you can take your hand on the bottom of that drawer and you could move it about probably 2 inches down. So that's going to fall apart at the bottom too. Yeah. It's going to fall apart at the top. Those are just, but they got a really nice face on it with a cool handle.
Oh, it'll look good if you just look. I mean, a drawer's a drawer. I mean, I think so much of this is about people not just assuming that these are like cars, and why would they put that there? Why would they do this? Oh, well, they know what they're doing. I mean, that's what I was totally ignorant when I bought my first RV. I just assumed everything worked and everything was done right. Everything was in the right place. And
here's a classic example that I tell people at my seminar. You would never buy a house without getting a home inspection by a certified professional that is going to check those, 90, 100, 200 thing, whatever it is. But we go out and buy RVs every day because we think they're like cars and never get them inspected. And we have the same issues with the same materials are being used in most of the stuff that's in there. But, the thing that I tell people is if you're looking to buy an RV, well, the dealer says, I inspected it. Would you buy an RV and without having a third party look at it or going through it yourself and doing the education of it? And even if they did it, when did they do it? The hardest thing for RV manufacturers, and I don't care who it is, Prevost, anybody, you will still have some adjustments. You will still have some things that need to be done, and we expect zero. You know, I mean, I ask people, how many people have ever built a house? You know, and I asked them, okay, when you got done, did you have zero callbacks, zero things that the plumber, the electrician, the landscaper, the painter, nothing had to be rework done? They go, oh, you know, we expect that in the house.
Yeah.
But we want that RV to be absolutely perfect and nothing wrong with it. And then half the time it's because we didn't maintain it right.
Yeah.
And, you know,
they don't educate, you know, if the consumer actually seen the list of stuff that they've been like, we recommend to them, it's overwhelming. I mean, it's astronomical. You think, wow, I got to do all that to it.
Yeah.
But you add up all the stuff that, like you're saying, around your house that you have to do, it's the same. You know, you want a home on wheels, it's going to shake.
Well, and I know for a fact that we did tests when I was at Winnebago. When you have temperature changes during the day, it's, you know, 40 degrees in the morning and 65, 70 degrees in the afternoon. Those materials will expand and contract, and they all do it at different rates. And one of the hardest things is to keep the front cap from the roof material moving. It will literally go 2 inches during temperature changes, different inches in there. So they developed this J channel, it's called, where the roof material comes up and slides in, kind of, you know, sandwiched in. That sealant now becomes really important in there because that has to move with that expansion and contraction. And, you know, and those are the things that are challenging. And you have to look at that stuff, you know, not so much when it's new, but, you know, the more you can understand about the build of it, the less issues you'll have in quality on the backside. So here's Barbara said she looked at 2 RVs, midpoint, 28 degrees with ice and snow, $15,000 difference. One, the ambient temperature, 45 degrees, comfortable. The other, I could see my breath. And, you know, again, that gets into insulation, price point, you know, thin wall or loose fill insulation. It's going to have an R factor of about 4 to 5, where the block foam insulation will have, I think now they're getting up to 7 out of that. You know, I've been to shows where somebody says, well, with the sidewall of this so good, you have an R factor of 45. That'd have to be about a 6-foot thick wall.
Yeah. Also, the vacuum bonded walls, just, you know, I'm don't really want to say manufacturers, but the lower line units, they're a thinner material, inch and a quarter wall versus an 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches. You know, we offered to a while back, I think it was about 5 years ago. I kept getting owners that would come in, and it was kind of, you know, I'm a young business owner, and I've been doing this now for 25 years. 20 of the years I've been almost self-employed, and I worked at the big box stores. And it would sicken me to think that, you know, that could be my grandma, that could be my grandpa that's buying an RV. So any place that doesn't offer you some type of a free inspection, don't go there.
Yep.
You know, I mean, we offer something that's called a free exterior evaluation. We're checking the roofs, the walls, the floors, underneath, the appliances. We're looking at all the basics, and we do that for free. And some guys will come in and they'll say, oh, you're just doing that so you can look to find something wrong. No, I'm looking to do that to protect you. You know, we had a guy here the other day wanted to do a TV and satellite, and everything on his roof, Dave, was shot. He needed a new roof. You know, so I mean, we look at stuff all the time to try to protect the consumers. And don't be afraid to go to your dealership or your service center, your mobile repair guy, and ask them to look at stuff. You know, even these pictures, I've never seen these pictures before, but look at the air conditioner. I don't know what that red chemical is around it. It looks like they spray foamed it, but the roof.
No, this was from
water.
This was from I think a 2006 Jayco, and the guy just bought it, and he had a sagging roof on the inside, so he brought it up to us to do some video repairs and so forth in it. And one of the things that you know, most manufacturers, again, getting back to the education, this air conditioner is held on with 4 spring-loaded bolts, and once a year you need to go in and tighten those bolts up in you know, in each one of the quarters, because it will compress the gasket between the air conditioner and the roof material. And he didn't do that, so all that red stuff is where it would pool.
Yeah,
when because it was not being used before he bought it. And so when we pulled it off, that to the right picture is what that cheaper,
Yep.
stick and tin is going to do. And again, it's not that it's a bad manufacturing and quality issue, but if you don't know that and you don't check those seals and you don't do the things, it's a lot more maintenance. And that's where your price point comes in, is that, if you'd had a fiberglass roof on this, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. And I tell everybody change their roof air conditioner gaskets every 5 years, regardless of the use. Insert moldings is another big one for me.
Yep.
There's standard insert moldings, and then there's heavy duty insert moldings. And talk about the cost factor. It's not much of a savings that we look at. Like if I go and I buy a standard insert molding, maybe cost me, we'll say $20, and maybe the heavy duty is $28. Well, you times that by how much the manufacturers are building, and that's hundreds of thousands of dollars for them. So just little things add up.
Yep.
Here's
another price point as you go along. Some manufacturers put a awning over the slide room. Most manufacturers don't. In fact, travel trailers, I hardly ever see it. Fifth wheel, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And the reason that this awning is on here is that not only do you want to keep moisture from going on top of that unit, but I don't want debris on top of that slide room. I don't want sticks and acorns, because I'm going to park underneath the tree to get shade. And if I have the sticks and acorns in there and I pull that room in, it's going to tear apart all that seal at the top of it, and I am going to have moisture gremlins like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
I don't have to have that awning on there, but every time I break camp, if I don't, I better get up there and clean that awning off with something.
I'll bet you that half the people, first-time buyers, don't even notice that. Don't even look.
No.
They don't look. And one without the awning is going to be sold cheaper.
Exactly. Well, you said the other day some lady was so happy she bought a 6 slide room fifth wheel.
Oh my goodness!
Right.
Yeah.
Well, she's going to clean off 6 rooms before she leaves. Now, go ahead.
So think about on the slide out toppers too, right? So if you came to me and you said, "Hey, why should I buy a slide out topper?" Right? Well, if it's sunny outside and I go out and I have no hair, so whether I put a umbrella, that's acting like an umbrella. It's reducing the temperature in the room's heat. I bought a thermal camera and I've started doing testing on different rooms, and the temperature drop is huge by just adding that. Again, the roofs of the slide outs, they're only about 1.5 inches thick. So they're getting hot, and that heat is being transferred into the coach. So if you have a unit that doesn't have a slide out and it's summertime and it's hot, put a slide out topper on it. And like Dave said, it's protecting the roof. It's protecting the wiper sill. There's an inner and an outer seam where the T-flange molding's at. It protects that. It protects the side seam seals.
Yep.
There's a lot of benefits for having a slide out topper.
Well, and if you got 6 slide rooms, those awnings are going to be about $1,200 a piece for the small ones.
Yeah.
Even more than that. So you could have $10,000 just in awnings on that 6 slide room that's out there. And those are, again, you get back to those price points and take a look at it. One of the things I wanted to, I'm going to switch this off here and go back to an interior shot. Chuck and I were talking earlier about, I'm going to put this one up here. So, we talked about the carpet. You can tell the differences in those. This one, it looks like it has a wood floor in it. It's a cheap vinyl floor. We pulled it up and put different flooring in this one. But, the things that I look at, for example, the fabrics in this one. Now, this one happens to be a Sun Cruiser, and I know for a fact they use the Highline fabrics. And Highline fabrics will not fade as fast. They won't pull apart at the seams. Anywhere you got a stitching in those cushions, you've got holes punched in by needles with thread in them. And if you've got thin fabric, eventually that'll pull apart and it'll ruin. And they call it the Weizenbeek double rub method is how they test it. And they take a steel brush and it's got to make 10,000 rubs. That's way more information than you need to know, I'm sure. But the other thing then is the foam that's used inside these cushions. Now, most people just use a 1-layer foam. It's nice and comfortable when you sit on it when it's brand new. 6 months down the road, that thing feels you're on the frame of the bed. pull those take those cushions and unzip them, look inside. If you see dual density foam, that's got a heavier foam to hold up. A lot of them will put a coarse foam, so when you slide in and out of like a driver's seat or the dinette, that light foam actually tears and curls and gives you these little knuckles and knobs on the inside of it. So, all that translates to longevity and, fabric's not fading as fast and holding up, but it all costs money. And you have to decide, if that's worth it. One last thing I want to say, I know we're getting at 7:00 here, but I am not totally convinced that quality today is any worse than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I look at it in 1988, I took new units out and went across the country and trained dealers, and they fell apart on me. We had Mindy board that was delaminating the sidewalls. We had the compartment doors for the outside compartments were with this foam filled like igloo coolers that were blistering all over the place. We had graphics that were fading within 6 months, and it was, but we were selling, as an industry, probably half of what we're doing today, maybe even less than that. 600,000 units yesterday, and I had nobody to tell about it. I couldn't get on the internet and go, this thing is horrible, and I had no forums, and I had the avenue to get this stuff out there is so much. I don't know what you call it. I mean, Chuck, you know what's been like 25 years ago. You maybe write an article about it, and if you had a dozen people that saw it, you were lucky.
Yeah, I would say, Dave, that the quality. My friends who are technicians, whatever, have said that to me through the years. But look at the RVs today; how much more complicated they are. We didn't have there. And you get in the middle of the back there where you live in the the around cornfields there, Dave.
They don't use RVs back there, do they?
How many mechanics? They know how to fix tractors, but how many know how to fix RVs and all the electronics and everything you break in some little small town? That's the problem, I think. Is you remember older people remember when they could. When they could fix their cars, when they could change the spark plug and adjust the timing, and it was simple. Now, so I think that's part of the problem. They're more complex. I will just say this in ending, and that is when you say that RVs most last 3 to 5 years, they're going to start breaking down. I will say they're starting breaking down. They're going to start costing people money from that point on. And unfortunately, RVs are being sold with 12 to 20-year-old. 20-year loans these days. How many years are those people, if they have a serious breakdown, they go in and says, that's going to be $5,000 to fix. They figure they're going to pay $380 for 20 years. And their RVs are going to sit there for the next 17 years, and they're stuck with something they can't get rid of. So that's part of this whole thing. I think we ought to continue this discussion again soon. There's way too much stuff we didn't cover. So
it is. So, and we're at our hour, and we will, we just got one more comment that came in from Barbara again. She said, great discussion. You gave me some points to check. Dealer already sees me coming and puts a close sign on the door. That was good.
Some of her comments we haven't put up have been pretty interesting. She definitely does her homework, but she's a rarity. Most people, they fall in love. Hey, if I ever really need to get a new job, I'll go sell RVs and make a lot of money because
educate yourself.
The dream.
Look at it from a residential standpoint and start looking those things, and don't just get wrapped up in the floor plan and I call them the wow factors. You get these fifth wheels with great big windshields in the front of them. If you're going out and you're going to camp by the lake or the mountains and there's nobody else there, that's great. Most of the time, I remember taking one of these out with a great big side window, and the advertising we had was, you will think of the view you'll have. It'll be breathtaking, and you'll never forget it. And they were right, because I pulled into a campground late one night. I got up in the morning. I walked out in my shorts and T-shirt, luckily, and I had my cup of coffee. And the view I saw of the guy next to me in his underwear was breathtaking.
Yeah, and I will
never forget it.
And if it's not the guy in his underwear, it's you're standing over 3 feet away is the neighbor's sewer hook hose, and that's remember that RV that finally that Country Coach put out years ago and had a balcony on the side.
Oh yeah.
Oh, in most RV parks, that balcony
use it.
right out over the sewer.
Or you'd be sitting in your neighbor under your neighbor's awning.
Yeah,
I was just going to say one last thing too. If you're going to go get a used RV, 1 year old, 10 years old, again, do your homework, because we just a while back another article that we posted on RV Travel about replacing carpet in a coach. It's a lot more. Like that customer that has 6 slide out rooms. Right. Let's say in 5 years somebody buys it and decides, I don't like the color of carpet, or maybe they didn't take good care of it, or maybe it was cheap carpet. Can you imagine the hours and the time that's going to take to replace that?
Oh, you got to get them inspected. You have to. You don't know that the average RVer brings their unit to their house when they get ready to go on a trip. They park it in the driveway, they plug it in, they run the refrigerator. If it's an absorption refrigerator, now they're at an incline, and since they're not sleeping in it, they don't level the coach. While that fluid doesn't make its way back down, it starts to flake and it ruins the cooling unit. You don't know that until it gets 90 degrees at some point in time. Now all of a sudden they sell it and you've got a $4,000 refrigerator to repair, or slide rooms that leaked, and a huge repair in that floor. So anyway, that's a whole other section that we're going to talk about. We appreciate everybody coming out in the comments. Barbara, we'll see you next week. Go to your dealer and let us know.
Come back next week and tell your friends.
Yes.
And we will have this archived on some of Dustin's channels, RV Travel, and on our Facebook and YouTube. So anyway, thank you very much, Dustin and Dave and me too. Anyway, all right. We'll see you guys and everybody else. Thank you.
Great rest of the week.
Thanks. Bye.
Travel safe.
Yep.